Entitled aunt achieves ultra-greed status and attempts to steal vehicles willed to nephew. My aunt has always had a greedy streak ever since I was a kid. She's the type of person who will yell at a store employee because something that was advertised isn't in stock or not at that particular store, or not on sale, and has been banned from entering multiple stores. When my grandmother was on her deathbed, my aunt had talked her way into getting my grandmother to sign her on as an executor of the will and ended up taking everything and anything that had the most value. My uncle was my best friend. I always looked up to him as a kid. He was a truck driver, so he would be gone for a long time, and I remember one summer he even took me with him on the road. But sadly, my uncle had cancer, and while he was in the hospital, my aunt had tried to get him to assign her as an executor of his will. But since he was quick to pick up on what happened when my grandmother passed away, he hired a professional estate lawyer that would take care of everything. You can imagine that my aunt was not very happy and was quick to throw out a sob story of how offended she was that her brother couldn't entrust her with an important task. This went on for 2 weeks. Even on his last day in hospital, she still brought it up but was asked to leave by nurses. He passed away peacefully in 2011. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but I quickly found out what my aunt was when we were all asked to gather at my mom's home, where the estate lawyer came to tell us who was getting what. So finally, my time came on the list, and I was surprised to have anything willed to me. What did my uncle will to me? His rig and car, of course. My uncle's rig is a 2008 Lone Star International, which was fully loaded, and his car is a 1966 Chevelle SS. My first thought was, what in the hell am I going to do with a big rig? My aunt's first thought. Well, she didn't have a first thought. She just screamed and cussed at the lawyer saying that I was too sick to have those things and didn't deserve them because I was his nephew and not his sister. The lawyer asked her to sit down and he would get to her. When my aunt sat down, she looked at me and said, "You're giving me the title to both of those," to which I laughed and said, "In your dreams, maybe." The lawyer kept going down the list, and because my uncle was a legend, he put my aunt at the bottom of the list and said, "To my sister, I am leaving her my luckiest, most important dollar, because all present at this meeting will know she needs it most," and then was handed the dirtiest-looking Canadian $1 coin which was sealed in a block of acrylic. Me, my dad, and my other uncles nearly wet ourselves laughing. My aunt, however, didn't find it that funny, and instead went into another tirade on how this was unfair, saying she didn't have anything to hold on to, that was his. The day passed, and then the nightmare began. My aunt would call over and over and over asking about the truck, wanting to buy the car, if I was going to sell the truck, if I was going to sell the car, all to which I said no. Things got worse when my aunt started saying that she wanted her car and she had someone who wanted to buy our truck. At this point, I got extremely irritated and said, "It's not your car, it's my car, and my car is staying with me, and it's not our truck, it's my truck, and no one is buying it." A week later, I woke up and heard something, so I went to investigate, and there was a tow truck in the driveway. I quickly told the tow truck driver, who was a friend of my aunt, that if he put a hand on that Chevelle, I would have him arrested for trespassing and grand theft, and then proceeded to call the police. A cop showed up and I told the police officer my side of the story. Then he went to my aunt, and the conversation went like this.
"Ma'am, can you tell me, is this your car?"
Yes, it is. He just won't give it to me.
"Ma'am, do you have the title of the vehicle?"
No, I do not. He won't give that to me.
"Well, ma'am, I looked at the registration and title of the vehicle, and he is listed as the owner of the vehicle. That vehicle is legally not yours, and having it towed could land you and your friend prison time for auto theft."
Well, I think I am the one who should get the car, because he can't even take care of himself.
"Ma'am, it doesn't matter what you think. What matters is legal ownership, which you do not have."
A week later, my aunt attempted to take me to court for the car, but the case wasn't even put before a judge. My aunt refiled the claim again, it went to court, and once I provided a copy of the will, title, and registration, the judgment went in my favor, and my aunt was forced to pay my court costs after dismissing my aunt's claims with prejudice, meaning she can never file that lawsuit again. Then, tragedy struck again. This time another uncle passed away. I was on his will, once again. Can you guess what was left to me? A new car. My great-uncle's 1967 Chevrolet Impala SS, which he restored himself. My great-aunt, his widow, was thrilled that I got the car, but the mood quickly soured when she realized that my entitled aunt, her niece, really was not thrilled that I got it. This time she stepped it up a notch and skipped the screaming and complaining, and instead went to scheming. 3 days after I took possession of the Impala, she rented not just one flatbed, but 2 beds. She managed to get the Impala onto the flatbed and sped off, leaving her boyfriend behind, attempting to get the Chevelle on his flatbed as quickly as he could, while I stood by on the phone with police. Police quickly caught up with my aunt and arrested her, and her boyfriend soiled him in the process. She and her boyfriend both were hit with 2 counts of motor vehicle theft. Both were charged and found guilty and sentenced to 2 years and 2 days in jail. I haven't spoken to or heard from my aunt since she got out of prison, and I have no desire to. Before she was released from jail, I filed a restraining order against her, and it has stood since then. But the last I heard, she was still screaming at store employees, complaining about money, and asking about me and the vehicles. I still am the owner of all 3 vehicles, the Chevelle, the Impala, and the Lone Star International, and don't plan on selling any of them. I repair and build computers for a living, but more and more I have been getting into auto repair as a hobby. As I live in Canada, I do not drive the Impala or Chevelle during winter months, but every year I always take my great-aunt, who is now 96 years old, to A&W to get a burger, onion rings, and an ice-cold root beer in the Impala, which is something my great-uncle did for her since he got the Impala in 1970. A very good friend of my uncle's who now owns a business actually rents the Lone Star International from me. He promised me that he would not get a single scratch or spot of rust on any single part of it, and to this day that Lone Star looks factory new and has been all over the world. The guy that rents the truck even continued doing a little tradition my uncle did, which was to get a decal on the truck of the state. Flag of the places the truck has visited. It currently has 31 state decals and 3 province decals on it. My great-aunt isn't in great health, and she has told me that she put me in her will so that I will get her cars, which are 2 of my great-uncle's first cars, originally left to her in the will, which are a 1958 Chevrolet Impala and 1957 Plymouth Belvedere Fury, because she knows that I will take care of it and park it right beside the 67 Impala SS. I can already imagine the fallout that I'm going to get for that, so there may even be another post, though I really do hope there is not. Some time passed and the great-aunt is doing much better medically, and she is looking forward to her 97th birthday. Turns out that before he passed away, my great-uncle was working on restoring his 1958 Nash Metro, which I think is moderately terrifying because if you crash, that steering column is going to go right through you, and you are going to go through whatever car you crash into since that thing is a little tank. Great-aunt really doesn't want to hear about the Fury or the Nash anymore, so she gave me the title of the Fury. My cousin really wanted the Nash, which my aunt obliged him, and I'm not even disappointed because I think that thing is ugly as sin. My entitled aunt found out about it and threw a fit. She was on her way to my house, but without me even knowing this took place. I was surprised to find out that my mom had actually called the police. Police had called the entitled aunt to tell her that if she set foot on my property, then that would violate the protection order and she would be charged. So she had best stop the car, turn around and head home. Well, my entitled aunt couldn't get the Plymouth Fury, so she was going to try to get that Nash Metro. My cousin had called me and told me that she actually went to his house and said that the visit went nicely for maybe an hour. And then suddenly the Gollum switch was flipped, and she started listing off reasons as to why he needed to give her the Nash, such as, when she was little she used to ride in the Nash, so she deserved it. Further, the entitled aunt said that my cousin wouldn't take care of it, and the car would be much safer at her place. All of these did not faze my cousin, and instead, he told the entitled aunt to get out of his house after citing the reason of how it was kind of his dad's car. He had to deal with her pestering him for around 7 months, and then he finally just blocked any form of contact with her. She hasn't tried anything since. The great-aunt then went on to sell the farm, which upset the entitled aunt even more because that's one more thing she can't have, and it is even in the will that my cousin and I retain the vehicles at all times. And now my cousin gets the house in town, and so the dust has settled now and things are all good. Now some pretty good things have come out of this. So number one is when I found out that my mom was the one that called the police on my aunt. That led me to talk to my mom for the first time in 5 or 6 years, and now we are on speaking terms. I also have a much better relationship with my cousin, since we were never really that close to each other, to begin with, and he was blown away at the fact that I have a full-on machine shop on my property, so on weekends we will be in the shop talking, and he has been helping me with my project. My project is, I found a Lincoln Continental MK3, and ever since I was a kid, it's been a dream to have the car from the movie. Well, the car. So we have started chopping the crap out of it and making everything by hand to get it looking perfect. The Impala, Chevelle, and Lone Star are all doing great. The Lone Star had a bit of a hiccup and the entire transmission and engine needed to be replaced. But Lone Star actually said that the engine should have been replaced long ago, so that all got done and signed off on along with a new hitch plate being installed on it. My uncle's friend still rents the Lone Star from me for his business, and he even got a custom decal put on the trailer for it of a chicken hawk and now has 42 state decals on it and 6 provincial decals. Me and my cousin both got invited to a car club because we were at a recent car show, A friend of ours had recent dealings with this car club. They gave him some of the money needed to restore a 1951 Studebaker Woody, and once the car was complete, they actually had taken him to court to get the car, which now sits in their showroom. So we asked them when our friend was going to get his Studebaker back, and then I said that I don't associate with people who have zero moral fiber. We are now working towards getting him his car back, since legally the people in the car club can't so much as sit in the car without our friend's permission. Since nothing was in writing, he has to pay the car club back, but won't get the car back until he has paid the car club, because his lawyer was an idiot. Before I forget, the entitled aunt has actually had to come out of retirement, and now both she and her boyfriend are forced to go back to work since they ran out of money pretty quickly. As it turns out, having multiple homes and going on vacation 2 and 3 times per year drains your bank account pretty darn quickly. I have recently gotten onto speaking terms with some more members of my mother's side of the family, one of which is my uncle. I need to put a little backstory in here on my uncle before we begin. So my uncle was paying the entitled aunt for a house she owned. They have a written agreement, which is almost like a rent-to-own agreement. So my uncle has been paying an inflated sum of money for 3 years, in total of which, when that sum hit $64,000, that was it. The house was then given to my uncle. I will say it again. This is in writing. Now, a few years ago, my uncle got into a car accident which was by no means his fault. He was actually hit by a bus driver who was intoxicated at the time, and because of that, he got a very large settlement. Because of that accident, my uncle broke both of his legs, so he gave the entitled aunt his bank card, and she was using that to do things such as pay his bills and get groceries for him. Now here is where the problems begin. EA and my uncle got into an argument. She kicked him out of the house and refused to refund him the money he gave her. I also looked at the numbers for the settlement my uncle got. Out of $977,000 by my count, only $25,000 was spent on him. So, by my count, my aunt has stolen a little over $1 million from my uncle. I expected this, but I never in 1 million fucking lifetimes expected this amount. I am fucking livid. I haven't told my uncle yet because, to be honest, I don't know how the fuck to tell him. How the fuck do you tell your uncle, yeah, your sister stole $1 million from you? Also, factor in that my uncle is a recovering alcoholic. He still drinks here and there, but he doesn't get blackout drunk like he used to. He is working for a friend of mine whom I told very directly that if you smelled alcohol on him, send him home without pay. So I really don't want to tell him and have him go on a downward spiral. I honestly have no idea what to do. I know that I have to tell my uncle this, whether or not he chooses to pursue it. He won't have a choice because this isn't right. I will make him pursue it, and I will give him my lawyer and pay for it. So anyways, I just had to put this out there. It is kind of vague. For that, I apologize, but for the time being, this is all the information I have. I really did not want to tell my uncle on the weekend of Thanksgiving, so I opted to wait till Monday since it was a long weekend. I got my lawyer at my place, I got my uncle at my place, sat my uncle down, and put what I found in front of him. He asked what it all meant, so I had to tell him that the total sum of $977,000 is missing and is what the entitled aunt stole from him. He broke down and couldn't comprehend why she did it. Aside from that, I would say that he handled it reasonably well, and even he didn't know what to do, so my lawyer explained it. In Canada, this goes down as financial abuse, and there is a good reason for that. Since my uncle gave the entitled aunt his bank card and PIN in good faith, expecting that she would use it only to pay his bills and get him groceries, the fact that she withdrew money without him knowing is what brought that to light. Now, financial abuse in Canada is a federal crime. The fact that the money she took was a settlement makes it even worse. This is where it gets complicated. Because of the amount of money, this isn't a civil matter. My uncle agreed to take action, and so what we had to do was get not only the provincial government involved, but also the federal government involved. One thing about agencies, sometimes they work well together, sometimes not. Yesterday, my entitled aunt and her boyfriend were arrested and charged. Both refused to speak without the presence of an attorney, which is their right. The entitled aunt tried to call my uncle but wasn't allowed to. So she called my mom and tried to tell my mom that it was all bullshit. I was lying. My uncle was lying. She took care of my uncle. He never paid for the house. She never took anything. Went into detail as to how much of a burden I was on the family, etc. So they already had the warrant to search the entitled aunt's house, and they did find some of the money. The advisor told us that usually when people steal a large sum of money, they do something called squirreling, where they will stash the money away in a mattress, under floorboards, in walls, door panels, etc. In this case, they found upwards of $87,000 stashed in airplane carry-on bags. At this time, keep in mind that they are still searching, but in order to do certain things, such as cut holes in floors and walls, They do need different warrants for that. All of the entitled aunt's bank accounts have been frozen. They have people looking into every single transfer and transaction she ever made. They also flagged my cousin's bank accounts and her grandchildren's accounts, pretty much anyone who got money from her. Their accounting for the last 5 years is going to be gone through with a tooth comb and a microscope. The way my lawyer explained the entitled aunt's situation is this: the more money they get back, the better it will be for her, but both she and her boyfriend are still in jail saying they didn't take shit. So maximum they are looking at 7 years in prison, minimum 3 years in prison, plus they will have to pay reparations, not only to my uncle but also the government, because the federal government most definitely will be charging her with some sort of fraud evasion. I did make a statement detailing how this whole situation came about, and how I found what I found that will be used in court. But at this point, this is where my involvement ends. My uncle is doing okay, he is doing a few home improvement projects, making shelves, etc. So I told him that if he wanted to use my shop, he could, and he has taken me up on that offer, which is good because it keeps his mind off of the whole situation. And I have also noticed that he also doesn't drink as long as he is busy. I honestly do think that the entitled aunt did plan this from start to finish, from selling her house to kicking my uncle out simply because she just wanted to take more, and that was the only way she saw where she could take more, and that left my uncle damn near homeless. Do I wish it happened in this way? No, I don't. But I also think at the same time, this needs to happen. Hopefully, now the entitled aunt will actually begin to understand what kind of harm materialism brings you all because of the fabricated perception of status. Jokes aside, the border agents have money dogs that can find them. Since the Canadian feds and courts are involved now, it will be child's play for them to tear through everything and find it all. That mega entitled heartless witch of a Karen really needs to put her away for life. Holy freaking yikes. Also, everyone on her side of the family defending her. They're all moronic fools, really hoping for good for the OP. This entitled aunt is the worst that I have ever seen. She not only tries to snatch the cars that weren't willed to her, instead, she also tries to take over the house of his brother and steal whatever she can.